bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, more just like a conversation, which is nice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think like...
Because sometimes I've been sent questions beforehand, like on a bit of paper, and it's like, then you're like rehearsing it, and it doesn't come across the same. I'm worried that, is my necklace gonna smack the...
I'll let you know if it is.
Okay, cool.
I'll be able to hear it if it's coming through.
Yeah, mate, I don't feel like you can't tell me either. Get told every day that I'm rambling on too much.
He's back.
Damn
We
it.
did have some unfinished business.
Yeah, I think that's it now. Of all the interruptions, that is not what I thought was going to happen. This is so funny.
Yeah, so he only uses...
Alexa, stop.
What was she gonna do?
She was just gonna like, I don't know, talk. Shut up, Alexa.
I think at school, because all my friendship group, everyone was into football, and I kind of wasn't into football. I was into colours and textures and things. So I found it a real, kind of like a safe place in the art room.
Exactly, yeah. I've been selling professionally since I was like 9.
And there's just something fascinating about people. I love seeing what they wear and how they express themselves. People will do weird stuff that you would never be able to think of. Like, I saw this one guy who was like, obviously heading to the train station, and he was like skateboarding, but also like wheeling his wheelie case. Like, it was so slick. I was like, damn.
I painted my pictures on side of trains and I went to prison. Banksy paints his pictures on side of a train or somewhere equally illegal, and it gets protected and it gets sold for millions. So that's the difference between graffiti and street art.
I've done murals and pieces of work before where people have literally come up to me and been like, what is that? I don't like it. And I've been like, okay, interesting. That's totally fine. Like, not everyone's gonna like what I do. Like, they're just not. But you've talked about it, and that you would have never talked about that wall before. Like, that was just a blank wall that you probably walked past on the daily and didn't give a crap about.
As an artist, if someone's indifferent about my work and they haven't got an opinion, that's probably worse to me than somebody saying they hated it. At least if somebody tells me they hate it, like, I'm not going to take it personally. Like, they're allowed to hate it, that's fine. And at least they're giving me an opinion and giving me a bit of emotion or whatever. If someone's indifferent to it, then that's probably when I'd start getting self-conscious and like, oh God. But again, it's art, it's subjective, isn't it? So who's to say what's good and what's bad and what we should see and what we shouldn't, Talking to my mates, they're like, I don't know what they do, like accounting and coding and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go paint. I'm going to get messy and play with shit for a bit. I'm just like, what have I got myself into? But I love it.
Pardon?
Do you have a favourite font? Favourite font? It's hard to say.
That's a banned question. So whenever I give talks to students, I always say, don't ask me what my favourite font is.
Yeah, I did. But I quite like that as a comment.
Yeah. It's interesting because some people don't see themselves as being creative, but creativity is in making a sandwich or, kind of choosing what to wear. And, it's kind of all those ideas of creativity. I don't know if people kind of feel excluded from that because, they didn't go to art school or, they don't understand modern art and they don't understand how artists work and live because they don't come across those people in everyday life. So I think I think everyone's creative. Everyone's got the potential to be creative, and I think it's just showing how you can be creative in lots of different ways, really.
I think creativity is in every human, to be honest. And I think you just need to look at children, for example. They're so creative. There's no kind of self-consciousness with what they're creating. So I do think everybody is creative, it just needs kind of nurturing.
Like, what's your first sort of memories of art?
Very, very early. Like, it's a weird one. Like, if I'm asked this sort of question, I always go back to like, you should probably just ask my mum because she knows better, because she's known from, like, it was literally from the start. So it's like been ever since like I could remember is I've wanted to do art. I've always wanted to be an artist or be creative. I didn't understand school. I didn't get the point in that. It was more like, well, I already know what I want to be, so why do I need to do all this stuff that makes me deviate from that path only to find it again? And that was me from like 4 years old. I was like, why do I need to do that?
I think my first memories of art would be sort of spending time with my grandma, who was always really creative. She's still an artist to this day. And so a lot of my time spent with her would be like doing different artworks or being taught different techniques and things that we could do together. She always said that she'd always be, which I think is so lovely, that I'd inspire her, because I'd often like be sat and we'd be doing one thing and then I'd like come up with like a ridiculous idea and then run off and like go and get a load of materials and then come back and like make something that was like sort of beyond what she'd maybe have ever really thought of before. She never got to do art when she was younger. Obviously, it just wasn't really seen as a job for her to even pursue. And it wasn't until later in life that she went back and actually studied. And so I remember like exploring all her drawings and just thinking she was really amazing. So yeah, I think that was probably my earliest kind of memories of that.
I can't remember it, but my mum always talks about when I was little, and we used to have this like high chair, and she said she'd just leave me for literally hours. But yeah, she loves the story when she like once left me to it, and she came back and I showed her and I was like, look what I've made. And I'd cut off a lot of my hair and just like stuck it to the paper because I thought it looked nice. But yeah, so I can't remember my first time because I've just always been doing it, but my mum has lots of stories.
We usually start with something like this, but what's your first memory of art?
I think, well, I did a lot of travelling with my grandfather when I was growing up. So he'd retired from his job in the coal board, and he wanted to kind of see the world. So I was about 9 or 10 years old, and our first trip went to Pompeii and Naples and Capri, and I think it was through collecting things like, you know, bus tickets when we'd be in China, and kind of coming home and looking at the type and the design and kind of making that association between travel and discovery, and then, you know, the kind of graphic links between that. I really understood, you know, the connection you can get with art. Yeah, I think those like early trips with my grandfather were really formative, and they kind of introduced me to the wider world as well from where I grew up. So I'd come back from those trips and then I'd give a little talk at school about the things that I'd seen, and, you know, I'd like little postcards that I'd collected and things like that.
I was like horse girl at school, so I just drew horses and I would sell them to my friends for 50p so that they could write their name on it and pretend they'd done it and take it home. So yeah, I was just always drawing. But it's those weird little horse drawings I remember specifically. Yeah, I've outgrown the horse girl thing now.
But you sold them to people?
Yeah, so I was already grafting like from a young age, like, or they'd like trade me for their like bag of crisps or something, you know. I was on the hustle.
So you can say like you've been a professional selling art.
Exactly, yeah. I've been selling professionally since I was like 9. I think I just influenced myself. I just did it every day, all day, drawing. Yeah, so my mum, she went to art college. She's more of I would say like a drafts person. She's amazing at watercolours and studies, and she still paints as a hobby, still these amazing watercolours. And then my dad, although he's not done any like formal art teaching or training or anything, he's a really creative. He's just like a multi-skilled tradesperson. But yeah, I'd say everyone in my family's pretty creative. My brother's a musician as well, so yeah, all got a bit of something.
I wasn't really into art at all, really. I was more into sport. Music would be my first introduction to people expressing themselves. I think when I started looking at art and making it for myself more, seriously, I got a book called Subway Art and Spray Can Art, and I got them when I was about 12 or 13. And then it was like a snowball effect from there for me. I just got absolutely obsessed in graffiti art, but I didn't really engage with school too much, so it was the graffiti art that really like sparked it for me, for sure. Specifically like 1970s New York subway, like subway train art. Just started off tagging in around 1996 in Bradford, using pens, spray paint when we could get our hands on it. I used to do a lot of skating, so you'd see a lot of graffiti in the skate parks or areas where we were going skating, so that's what probably opened my eyes to it locally. So yeah, around 1996, 97 we did my first piece of graffiti.
Yeah, no, first memories, like, I used to get these like sets as a kid. I'm sure a lot of people know about it. It's like a sort of open it up and it's like got every art supply that you need. So I was like, from an early age, it was like very, let's get these things that he's clearly wanting. And yeah, you're like getting those things for Christmas where I'm like, this is everything I ever need to paint, make, draw, do whatever. And I'm like, this is great. Like, this is like a little studio in my, it's like a little present. So yeah, that's like the very, very early, like opening that Christmas present, being like, yeah, cool, I can be an artist.
They were the worst as well, weren't they?
Yeah, they were shit. I'm not saying they were good, but it felt good, I didn't really like look up to people. I mean, Steve Buchanan might count, Art Attack, because I watched a lot of, is it Steve Buchanan? Is that right?
Neil Buchanan.
Neil Buchanan might count. Take two. But yeah, Neil Buchanan was a funny one, because yeah, Art Attack after school, like all the time. And I'd watch that and be like, oh, I'm going to make that.
Classic kid of the 90s watching Neil Buchanan on Art Attack. And just like, when he did like the really big stuff, I was just like, that's cool, I want to do that.
This is an Art Attack. This is an Art Attack. This is Art Attack.
He died,
I think.
of an heart attack.
Oh my god, you got that.
Sorry man, dad joke.
No, I love it.
Have you got a really special photograph that you want to frame but can't afford one of those fancy, expensive frames? What you need is one of these. A sponge frame. Come and have a look at this.
With my upbringing, I'm from quite a small town, and it's so strange because I think that a lot of the people, especially the people that I grew up with in that small town, are some of the most creative people that I've ever met, especially growing up with them, because we didn't have much money, we didn't have much to do because there's not a lot going on. We didn't have much like tools or utensils or whatever like to make things, but we still made, like, we were at the skate park and we'd like make this ramp out of like nothing, whatever we found, or create this thing. Or we'd go into the woods and make like this massive, we called it Krillville. It was like very not okay, we probably shouldn't have done it, but we essentially like got loads of wood and things like that and like made this little village in the woods. And some of them like stayed in it like for a couple of days and stuff like that, because we were like, this is brilliant, like we've made our own little village. But it's like the restrictions that came from like we've got nothing to do. It's like making dens as a kid and things like that. You've got nothing to do, so like what do? Become this imaginative, like creative person and like create a den and then imagine all these things. And
like I had quite some might think bizarre upbringing in that my mum had this my parents had this belief that I didn't have any TV when I was little. We weren't allowed any TV because we had to use our imagination to keep us entertained. My mum has this theory that you develop your imagination as a young kid, and if you can like curate and harness and like nurture that as a little one, then it will feed your imagination as an adult. Now I do have this like very rich like creativity and imagination that fuels my work, and I do wonder sometimes whether it's because like as a kid, like if you were bored, you just had to make like games up and go do your own thing, and you relied on your own imagination to build that entertainment. So I wonder if it's kind of like nature versus nurture concept, isn't it?
There's the distinction between being childish and being childlike. They're two different things, and I think it's really important to keep that inner child. Like, when do you stop learning? You know, and then from becoming a parent, I've thought about this quite a lot. So like, when your child's learning to do things, they're using all their senses. They're touching things, they're putting it in their mouth, they're listening to it, they're using all the senses, and then all of a sudden we get to school, it's like sit still and listen, that's the only, and that's like, some people, especially myself, don't learn that way. So I think it's important to hold on to your child and play, because that, again, like, play is the most important way to learn, I think.
Like, say school, talking back about school, it was really difficult because it was like this thing that like felt so wrong, especially for a creative mind. It feels so wrong. I didn't get on with it at all. Children have this beautiful thing that the more we try and search for it, the further away from it we get, because we're trying to look for this thing, whereas it needs to just be coming through you. Like, you can't like find this creative genius quality. It just has to be there, and you have to trust it, and it's like a trust the process sort of thing. Like, you can't go looking for it. You just got to play and hope that through play it comes out of you.
I'll try use different mediums. I'll try use things that I've never used before, or combine different mediums that I've never combined before, and see what I come up with, and just play and experiment. And that's when you find little gems of, I don't know, you might just land on something and think, yeah, that I could take that somewhere, and then before you know it, you're onto, I don't know, something that you wouldn't have expected to be onto. And there's a beauty in that, because it's like, through play, you've kind of discovered something new, and then it's also fun to pursue that and see where it goes.
When I think about creativity, I'm like, it's up there somewhere, and I'm just trying to grab it. Like, I'm trying to pick it out of the air almost, like in moments. Like, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm imbued with creativity more, or more I'm like a little antenna that's picking up signals. That's more so what it feels like. And it feels like this thing that doesn't really exist. I'm willing to put more time into learning now than I ever have. And it's like, I love it. You need to carry on and keep learning, and then progress. And then that's for the late bloomers that then, didn't get on at school.
Where does creativity come from? A curiosity, maybe, and like obviously imagination.
If I'm thinking about personally, the need to create is really strong in me, and I've always wondered what that might be. And there's lots of factors to it, really. So like, some of it might be just, it certainly helps my own mental health. And some of that might be it's almost like journaling for me, so I can get my thoughts out of my head, which I have a lot of, and I can get them out of my head into a sketchbook or onto the page. But then also, the need for, I think being creative gives you it can give you purpose and meaning, and I think in life you need purpose and meaning, just to have some enjoyment out of life, and to give yourself some, because, why are we here, what are we doing? Sometimes I'm creating something and I'm thinking, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing here? Am I doing anything? Like, is this of any importance? But I think it always comes down to giving yourself some meaning and purpose. And I think people who are creative or create things, it does that.
I feel rubbish if I've not done something creative that day, that week. It just comes from a need. Like for me, it's like the need to eat. So it just comes from those like basic human needs for me.
A lot of the reasons why a lot of people don't make art is because there is the hardship you've got to go through before you actually start regularly like getting a joy out of it. I've got very low self-esteem about my work, and I definitely go through ebbs and flows, but I know full well that once I'm into the process and I'm like lost in it, that it's a very meditative state for me, and it is very good for my like mental well-being.
When I'm creating, I often get into my flow state, which is a time when like things stand still, my thoughts quieten, and hours can pass by, and that's something that I crave, and that's something that I like strive for every day. The process of doing it is the way you get the enjoyment. So it's not the end product. So it might not be like the end of my painting, it might not be the end of your movie. Actually, where the enjoyment and the meaning's coming from, for me, is in the process of doing it.
Social media kind of ruins that a little bit, isn't it? Because the desire to post something is sometimes stronger than the desire to make something. So
exactly, man.
Just like kind of ruined it a little bit.
It has, yeah, man. And then that stuff can be contrived, and then you're then creating from the wrong place. Like, I make my best work when I'm making it just for me, and I'm not thinking about anyone else's opinion, and that's where your true work comes from, I think.
But that's a crazy thing to have a child in, like TV and stuff.
Yeah, I know. There's still like cultural references where someone will say something about Disney Channel or something, and I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know.
And how long did that go on for?
My whole childhood. I didn't think, like, we were allowed to watch like documentaries and stuff. But then the only time we were allowed TV is if the babysitter was around, and then we'd like, me and my brother would be like glued to the TV.
So sort of moving on a little bit then, let's just hear a little bit about how you got to your style of work, and maybe how would you describe it?
Oh my God, I feel like that's quite a hard question. I mean, it's definitely colourful, but I've always loved kind of graphic design, and any colours and shapes, but like big, have always just really, I just love it. I just, like, it gets me hyped. Like putting a few different colours together in a certain way, it gives me some kind of satisfaction and joy.
It's so important because you can take that one colour and really make it glow, or really make it just buzz on the canvas. It's more about the importance of the relationship of the colours. And I guess there's so many options, you know, the options are endless for colour combinations, that it can become your own like personal stamp. So I think all artists would agree that their like colour palette, although colours are universal, their colours will be very personal to them.
The only bits of colour that we're so used to seeing are like billboards and advertisements and things like being put into our faces. I mean, in my eyes, why are buildings grey? Like, why don't we have more colour? Like, we have so much vivid and beautiful natural colours that we see in like nature, and yet our like built environments are just concrete slabs.
You know, now I've got a computer, I can use millions of colours, but I choose to use black and white because it's a connection to where I came from. You know, all the work that I really liked was produced with really minimal means, you know, like small press stuff and, you know, kind of zines and fanzines and things. You know, it's like when I was at college, it was 4p to get a photocopy made. And it's like, you know, I've got 12p, I can do 3 photocopies. How am I going to cram the most stuff onto this bit of A4 paper? Or how am I going to make like a little zine out of, you know, these 3 photocopies? There's an immediacy about words and phrases, and kind of, I think it's the way I communicate. Trying to sum up things really simply and really boil ideas down to their real essence and kind of connect through words and phrases. And I think I still want it to be understandable, you know, by the widest possible audience, really.
Something that you can't help, it's like something that's always coming through you. Like every contributing factor in your life is part of your style. Like I grew up in like a skateboard and then car sort of scene, like with like custom culture, and all of that collaborates into how I then think about drawing something, as well as the rules that I put in place. And I'm like, I have got a very sort of pretty much strict set of rules where it has to be like this, as well as what you can't help, like your upbringing, everything, are the 2 sort of things that contribute to style and how something comes out?
I was actually more like fine art initially, so like illustration didn't come until later at university. So originally I was always painting and doing loads of different crafts, and when I was younger it was exploring basically just anything that was out there. And then at school I was much more of like a kind of oil painter actually. I did like lots of portraiture and landscapes, and oils were my thing. But then when I was at university and I was going into the illustration world, I was having to unpick that learning of how to capture something as it is, and instead being like really playful and kind of, I guess I remember my professor saying like, why would you draw it as it is when you have your imagination to do anything you want with it? And I think that was like the tools, the learning of being adventurous and pushing the boundaries and becoming more abstract and using tools in a way that you wouldn't traditionally use them, and actually trying to push into being playful and using emotions to communicate something within your work. And then once I slowly started exploring different styles and different mediums, and my work has like slowly grown from that. But then I think what's been interesting now, because I've done a lot of heritage work, is kind of bringing my fine art background of those details and the kind of like playful abstract element of because obviously they're not like realism characters. So bringing that playful element with illustration, but also still like archival truth. So I think the kind of all my little elements of education are kind of coming together now, which is really nice to see.
The way that I present the work and the kind of typography that I use and the typefaces, you know, they've got a kind of connection with history, the history of design, and how all that kind of connects together to make the final piece of work that then just has to stand up by itself in the world. You know, it has to do its job without any explanation. You know, it's a simple choice of using less materials, but making those materials really say something.
I realised this recently. The way that I work, the paintings, they've got neat lines, the colours are contained, they're well thought out, and I've realised that helps me so much. Like, I'm a really logical person, really. I'm a creative person, but I'm, you know, the left side of the brain and all that. Really logical, and it helps me through that and gives me that sense of satisfaction. I have to create something, plan it, and see it come together as planned to kind of give me that dopamine for the rest of the week.
How would you describe your sort of style to somebody?
Yeah, so you know, it's a classic thing. You play it down a bit. I say a lot of lines and blobs, but actually the style, it's digital painting through a traditional lens. I think I've really got to the essence of what I'm trying to do, and simplifying it a bit and limiting myself a bit, and that means I can have more fun with it.
When you see it small on Instagram, it looks incredibly like digital work. And when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, like that you've moved to digital. And then when I was like looking closer on your website, I was like, oh no, it's clearly painted. And even looking at it now, it's really, I don't really know how to describe the line making. It doesn't sound like a compliment, but I kind of mean it as a compliment.
No, I'm glad you see that, because that's exactly what I do. So through like years of different processes, I then, because I used to take images I'd found like from graffiti and things like that. This was while I was at university, and I would try and reduce them down to the bare essence of what they were, and I would do that digitally. And then I got an iPad, and then I became really interested in how paint moves on a digital canvas. So that really influenced, and I was really interested in the push and pull between digital mark making and traditional mark making. And I think the most interesting part of that is the time aspect, because to create a gestural mark on Procreate, for example, it's like half a second. But then for me to create it in oil paint on a textured ground, it can take like an hour to create the same line. Although I used the iPad and Procreate a lot in the beginning, now I've kind of built it up so much as a visual language that most of these paintings I'm doing now, they never actually see an iPad. I just draw that way now. So I've kind of taught myself how to create lines and create this uniformity of an iPad, but just purely traditional, which I think is quite fun. Yeah, I really like it when people think that they're digital, because it means I'm doing something right. And then it's more of a surprise and a treat when you see them in person. Definitely. But
and they're huge as well, aren't they? Like, big.
Yeah, as big as possible, yeah.
I think I've drawn my influence from so many different places over the years, but originally it would have been the 1970s and 80s graffiti of New York, for sure. That's influenced a lot of my work. I think I try to draw influence from everywhere in life, really. I think if you start looking too specifically at other artists, it's very easy to slip into your subconscious and start trying to like mimic that stuff. So I think it's good to draw influence from lots of different places. It keeps it fresh.
At university, the illustration course was like really trying, again, kind of referring to what I was saying before, but like trying to make you play with no constraints of like what the outcome is. Like go make some shapes and play on the photocopier and just see what comes out. And there's no kind of expectations of what it should look like at the end.
What do you think is the main thing that makes you want to get up on a morning? Like, what is it that makes you tick to do?
I mean, again, depending on when you'd have asked me that question, there'd be very different answers. But I mean, obviously my daughter is number one. You know, everything, and as much as I can talk about my artwork, you know, my daughter would be the number one there. She also chooses what time I get up in the morning, so I've got no choice there, man. But then, my daughter aside, like what you were talking about, that little spark or that little thing inside me with thy need to create something, I'll usually have an agenda of what I'm wanting to go and work on that day. So when I wake up, that's always the first thought in my mind after my daughter. I did graffiti for so many years and I never even considered like a different kind of path in art. So then all of this, what I'm doing now, still feels really new to me. And so the excitement of learning. I think when my daughter was first born, I wasn't getting as much time for my practice, so I was having to change what I was making. So if I only got out here for an hour on a night, I started making a lot of like abstract work and work that I could make in one session, start to finish. I had a lot of time where I could sit and draw, which was something I could do sat on the sofa in house. So I took it back to, right, I'm just going to spend these first couple of years just honing my skills in drawing. So then when it's come to making like this new series of work that I've been working on, I started the work with like an abstract painting, and then I've left them with a lot more drawing going on. I think also, again, time's a lot more precious to me now, and it made me think, fuck, sorry, I shouldn't swear, should I? I definitely had a feeling of, God, I've procrastinated and I've wasted a lot of time over the years, and now my time's so precious to me. When I do get an hour in here, I'm so much more productive, and I've been more productive since becoming a parent than before, I think, yeah.
Yeah, my work is, generally speaking, colourful and abstract, and it usually is in the public realm or like in a outside kind of space, which I think has in a way like a performative element to it as well, like because I'll often be painting for a really long time, so then there's contact with people in that way, and then yeah, I like it to be quite I like to transform. I'm very much like impact. Impact is good, I like that. I always find like wandering around sort of cities and sort of exploring places, and also finding places that feel a little bit like people are a bit unloved as well. Not necessarily a quick fix, but like you could instantly like transform a place like through paint, and in quite an easy and quick manner. I can take this area or work this group of people and suddenly take something that was a very unnoticed bit of land or unnoticed building that's falling apart and actually suddenly draw attention to it and create like conversations from that. This is a building, we know that no one's like using it, we know that it's a bit of an eyesore, or it's like targeted a lot with like graffiti or antisocial behaviour. Okay, who's like a local community group that like actually like would really benefit from having a bit of ownership over that place, and how can I work with them to develop an idea and a concept that could look completely different and not be the traditional community kind of art mural that you would seen as well. So it didn't have to be like a rainbow and loads of hands holding. It was like, it could be something completely abstract that you wouldn't really quite understand, but underneath it all there'd be like a hidden depth of like where that had all come out of loads of conversations or loads of activities with people.
One of my biggest inspirations is Berlin as a city, because I think Berlin has this like fascinating relationship with its history and how it exhibits that in location. Having that like very honest relationship with your history as a city and bringing like education out of the context of a museum or a gallery and breaking out of those walls and having that discussion in an open space where everyone can access it is really interesting. And that's something that completely inspires my work, because I'm really, really interested in local heritage, and I'm interested in public art specifically, and like that relationship together I think is really exciting, because being public art already is breaking out the confines of like an art gallery, or where it can often, unfortunately, maybe culture is within walls that not everyone feels that they can access. Like it depends on so many different things, like whether it's their upbringing or whether they think that they're creative, or they think like a lot of people don't think that they're interested in art but might engage with a mural or street art in a way that they would never go to a gallery. And I'm really interested in how public art is this like free experience where you can engage with art, whether that's that you can, even if you were like, oh, I don't like that, at least you've like engaged with it. And then tying that kind of like free accessible access to art with learning history, and like showcasing local stories and like what happened in that building that the artwork is actually on, and also like local oral histories as well, like people's stories. That's where like my interests and inspirations really like meet in the middle of like bringing that archival material and those oral histories and the use of public art and illustration like together.
Specifically with mural art, it's very accessible and it's public, so at least you haven't got the elitist thing of a gallery, or somebody might be intimidated to go look at art in a gallery. Whereas like anyone from any walk of life or anywhere in Leeds or from any background, whatever, any demographic, they can go and they can see the mural, which is great because it's accessible. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody from Leeds who's painted the mural, because also you're going to benefit from seeing an international artist painting a mural in your city. It might open doors for a local kid who just happens to walk by and sees this international painter painting. Where else would they be getting that opportunity? I mean, street art has come from graffiti art. The ghettos, 1970s New York, and a lot of the graffiti writers who started this were black or Puerto Rican, or, you know, from poor communities, and that was like their voice in the street, and that was their way of being heard. And it was like, fuck you, listen to me. And you've got no choice in it. We're going to paint it here and you've got to see it. The mural stuff, unfortunately, is kind of like when people have kind of jumped on it a little bit and monopolised it a little bit and said, we can use this culture as a moneymaker. This can be an advertisement for us. We can tap into this subculture, and then that's probably where you then get it becoming a bit more elitist and like privileged white men doing it, because it's trickling down from the people who are paying for murals to be done.
I just think that there is a disparity, and I've definitely felt that like personally, especially being in like, well, working within murals and graffiti and street art. You know, like it is still a very male, like dominated like landscape, and obviously the art world is exactly the same.
It happens in murals a lot, you know, as I mentioned, sometimes someone's aware that in the local scene all the murals have been created by guys, so they need a female artist in there, which it's great that they're doing that, but it's kind of sometimes feels like a box ticking exercise. But in my paintings in my fine art practice, it plays such a big part, like the divide between male and female artists, and specifically northern female artists versus northern male artists. And it's something I felt a lot through my life, and I've only just started kind of talking about it. This is why I'm using text more recently in my work.
Yeah, over the last few years, a lot of the work that I've been doing has been centered around those conversations. And I've realised that I'm quite passionate about that and interested in sort of the female story and like how that sits in a city in a particular way.
Yeah, and it just plays such a big part now. I've just had so many like actual experiences of being treated differently as a northern woman compared to being a northern man in the arts. You know, the opportunities, the way I'm paid, the way I'm selected for an exhibition or for group shows. It's, you know, being a woman in the arts is one like aggression, but being a woman in the northern arts is another microaggression.
But like, for example, like me being pregnant at the moment, like being a female artist who's pregnant, like feels like a massively challenging thing to do because everyone believes that it's career suicide to have a baby.
Being made fun of your whole life for sounding the way you'd sound, or dealing with the limited opportunities compared to other people based on being a woman, being working class. So yeah, I mean, I'm angry at the art world specifically, but it all feeds into everyday life without you realising it. I guess in everyday life, you're used to the things that make you angry and you deal with them. Whereas I guess the art world is so much more specific. You're really studying it around you a lot more. So it becomes almost easier to be mad at it.
And again, this comes back to me being like, right, you've told me I can't do something, so I'm gonna do it. Like, I am gonna be on that bloody scaffold with a baby and I'm gonna be doing it and I don't care. Like, I'm gonna make it happen.
What's your relationship with Leeds then?
So I moved to Leeds 8 years ago, something like that. Basically for uni. I came up here for uni. I'd done some like work here before. My dad's a builder, and we were like taking out an old pretzel shop, of which I've got a giant pretzel hanging up because I kept it. I was like, I don't know, I like big things. I like collecting big things, and one of them was this pretzel. I was just like, yeah, I'm absolutely keeping that. That was my first ever time in Leeds, and I was like, this place is great. Like, I actually really, like, walking around, I loved it. Like, I got it.
I love Leeds. You know, it's changed a lot from when I first started coming here. I just never really feel bored of Leeds. You know, there's still more stuff to see. There's still more exhibitions and galleries to be involved with, and there's new ones popping up all the time. So yeah, it just feels like it's for such a small city centre specifically. There's just always so much going on.
But what's your connection with Leeds then?
So after I finished my foundation course, it was time to apply for a degree course. So I went up to Preston to have a look at their course, and it was in this brand new building, and everyone looked really attractive, and I just kind of thought, oh, I can really see myself here. You know, it all looks really neat and tidy and clean, and so I applied for that. But I also came to look at Leeds with a friend of mine, Andy, who wanted to do printmaking at Leeds. And we came to the city, and it was a bit rough around the edges, and you know, the art school was this kind of brutalist concrete building, and it was definitely didn't have the sheen of Preston. You know, it had a kind of realness to it. So I didn't get a place at Preston, so I had to come to Leeds instead. So I was like, oh right, okay, I'm going to Leeds now. So I arrived here, and the course, you know, obviously the course at Preston wouldn't have been right for me. The course at Leeds just completely opened me up. And Leeds being the kind of cultural city that it is, there's lots of music happening, so like, you know, all the touring bands would be here, and if I'd got my place at Preston, I would have turned out to be a very different artist and designer than I am now.
See, I think it's a great city to live in, man. There's like culture, there's exciting things going on, but then, so I like the feel of the city, but then you're close to nature when you live in Leeds. So, you know, half an hour drive out of Leeds, you can feel like you're in the middle of nowhere.
So many people in the city are so friendly, like they're really open to connecting you to people. Like it's really easy to meet people in the city. Like you'll go to an event and you'll see someone and they'll introduce you to someone, or like people are really open.
The one thing about the creative community though is I do think it's super tight knit, and I think that everyone talks and everyone knows what's going on and is looking out for each other.
The creative scene is brilliant in Leeds. Very sort of like friendly, very bouncing off each other.
There are, or have been, some really fucking great talented artists who've done a lot for the Leeds scene that aren't known about at all or not heard of, and even have influenced like a lot of like the street art and graffiti, especially in Leeds, is influenced by people who used to paint in Leeds who don't get any limelight at all now. We're talking about 2005 to about 2010 period. That's when Leeds, there was always graffiti in Leeds, but there was never any real street art at all. But during that period, there was a real buzz around it, and there was like a group of people who were doing that.
What I really like about it is that there's quite a lot of different styles. Like there's some that's more like realism, or for example the You and Me one is more like typography based, and then there's others which are more kind of like abstract patterns, and some which are quite illustrative, and like the huge ones are obviously like the ones down by Canal are always so eye-catching. Like that football one I love, because I kind of love that they left parts of the brick in the background and then they have like this super hyper realism character on the front. I don't know who the footballer is, but I love the mural. And like, yeah, I think that it's nice that in the neighbourhoods we have like the electrical boxes. Let's pay attention to where we live and like pour colour and energy into these spaces.
Every city will have different murals, and you can kind of get a sense of the landscape of their creative culture from city to city. So yeah, there are, you know, certain mural styles I see in Sheffield that really to me are just like, that's Sheffield summed up, and then the same for Leeds. So yeah, it adds to the city, but then it kind of becomes how you know the city, I think.
Like Leeds has got so many creatives and so many interesting people, but then like it's always been quite business focused as Leeds, and it hasn't focused as much on the creativity, and I feel like that's like a knock-on effect of that. I feel like, yeah, we will let you paint a mural, but it has to be a little bit dictated by us, and it has to be Leeds. And it's nice that people are proud to be from Leeds, of course it is. But then, yeah, I think we do need to see a bit more of like Leeds artists expressing themselves.
The city is so friendly in general, and the creative community is like really strong, even in the face of like what's currently happening with like loss of spaces.
I feel like it's having a moment at the moment, not necessarily a good one, where there's so much development happening and so much change, and actually some of the places that really need preserving haven't got really any protection from inevitable like disruptions that are happening, you know, recent closures, and I think that it is kind of growing at a rate that sometimes other smaller places cannot really keep up with. I mean, the studio spaces that I was in, they're no longer there. They're now like been developed into a college campus, and like everything's constantly changing.
I think the street art scene in Leeds is really interesting. I'd love to see it flourish more, and that the council would pour money into it, because then I think when the street art becomes like a thing that the city's known for, obviously it becomes like a tourist attraction as well. But obviously I'm a bit of a biased opinion on that.
Let me know when it's done. Yeah, we're all right. We're all right. Give us a little bit more time. Okay, so first of all, mural. Did you ever want to do a mural before that, or how did that come about? And I guess Were your headspace there already? Were you searching for it, or did it find you?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do a large outdoor piece of work, but I kind of wanted to make something that had a meaning and significance, you know, not just decoration for the outside of a building, and kind of, you know, that's almost just like doesn't really mean anything. I think, you know, I kind of wanted to make something that kind of said something. So yeah, when Laura first got in touch about the mural, I was like, it's got potential to be something really, really interesting.
Anthony Burroughs' piece that In Good Company did, I love that piece, which is the print. It's like text-based work, which you probably know. So
I think there are certain phrases and things that I've kind of used and reused within my work. So I think I did a little book of posters and stickers and things probably about 10 years ago, and one of them, it was just a little thing that said "me and you," and then it was just one of those things that was kind of hanging around, and then I made that into a print, and then I was kind of looking at the type, and I kind of thought, it'd be quite nice, you could swap the words around. And I think through that I was looking at, so Laura sent me through some photographs of the building, and it was a kind of big rectangle with a kind of pitched roof to it and a couple of windows, but apart from that it was just like a big vast empty space. And rather than just kind of design a poster and blow it up and put it on the side of a building, I wanted the type to engage with the shape of the building, and I wanted the type to kind of go off the top and off the bottom, as if it was like a continuous stream of connection, you and me and you. I think when you see it in photographs especially, it almost looks, like the building's been sliced, and to reveal this message that's inside it. So we were kind of planning the mural, I think we first spoke about it in 2018, we were planning it in 2019, and then the pandemic hit and put everything on pause, but we still wanted to make the work. It almost like it gave the mural added meaning, and because it was all about community and connection, and that was something that we'd been denied for 2 years. It felt like the perfect artwork for that moment, as like a very specific moment in all our lives, that kind of like reconnection and kind of re-establishing those relationships with people.
And I think at that time, the message was perfect, and I think it was really well received in the perfect moment, because at that point we all did need each other.
Yeah.
And that was exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When it first went out and went around the world.
Yeah, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and so we both put it on social media, and then it just kind of, then it all started happening.
I had high hopes for it, but I didn't ever have it just went wild. It was insane how far it went and how well it was received, and it was super exciting when you were seeing it. Kind of like, I remember a New York gallery picked up on it, and then someone in Australia, and it just, it was wild. I didn't expect it to go as far as it went, but I think it resonated with that moment in time.
It ended up being about a broader community and about connections between people coming together to make a community, and that idea of the kind of constant stream of connections talks about, a kind of community growing and a city growing, and connections between people that, become important things in everybody's lives. And that's why huge cities like Leeds grow up, because of all those connections between individuals to kind of create this space together. I think, we wanted to make a landmark, and it's turned into a landmark, and it's kind of really, it's done its job. When you just see it, when you come around the corner, it feels, I don't know, it's like seeing the Statue of Liberty, or or the Eiffel Tower, something you're super familiar with through images, but then you see the actual thing itself and you think, yeah, it really is there. You know, it's a real thing and it's painted on a wall with paint. I don't know, it's almost like if I do another one, it has to be of the same standard and as good as the one that, you know, that's in Leeds. So yeah, I'm not sure how to achieve that.
I mean, Emma's work's great. I mean, I know she's probably well known for the big one she did at the bottom of Mabgate, which is, you know, I was really happy to see that get done, because actually there isn't something on that scale being done in Leeds before, actually. That was one of the first big ones that we've had recently that's not sports related, it's her own style, and yeah, I thought, like, good on you. It's like, you know, it's an iconic piece that now, for sure.
I like to work with people and I like to bring people together through art. So often there's a massive part of process that happens that leads into the final thing. I think a lot of the time people see my work and then only see the final thing, but there's like a whole other kind of story usually behind like how I've got there. I've always been drawn to buildings and like the craft that goes into kind of designing a building. I've always really enjoyed being able to kind of wrap my work around a building and add that to it. It's like, I don't know why, but just found that like doing the Regent Street Bridge was like a dream come true, because it was like this beautiful architectural structure that I could like then paint on top of. That piece in particular took me like 4 weeks to paint alone. Never mind like the work that I had to do to actually design it and get it to a point where it was signed off. The council probably wanted it to tick a lot more boxes, but then in hindsight, because of timescales and the way that it worked, I ended up just being allowed to go wild. And I'm still like kicking myself that they allowed me to paint that. And then afterwards, sometimes I can feel a little bit of I feel a little bit weird about the pieces when I leave them, because I'm like the trauma of like being on scissor lifts on a daily basis and like managing all of that kind of stuff. I can sometimes have a little bit of a weird relationship with the pieces afterwards, so I'm like, oh, I don't want to see that. It's just reminding me of a very intense time in my life. It's not like a print where I can go, oh, I don't like that anymore, I'll get rid of it. Or it's in time, it's stuck. But also it was really nice for me because, like I said, Mabgate, which is literally like, that is the bridge to Mabgate, was a journey for me through my whole creative career. So as a place to be able to like leave my mark, it was really, really awesome and like really great to just like give it something back and be like, here you go, I'm gonna paint this and make it like super visible and kind of like connect that city back up again. But it also feels like it's like special to that area, which, because if you don't walk to that end of town, you would never see it. Like, I'm pretty sure there's probably quite a lot of people who don't drive who've never seen that piece, and I love that it's like a little hidden discovery that you might find.
We'll talk about murals, but you know, if you do want to talk about other stuff, don't feel...
Yeah. No. Well, the mural stuff overlaps with the graffiti stuff, you know, it's... Because sometimes I might just get a mural to paint that is just graffiti, but it's still a mural. You know, what defines a mural, you know what I mean? I'm proud of a lot of my graffiti work that I did, but that would be for very different reasons to being proud of like the mural work that I now do. I don't know if you want it on camera, but if I'm being totally honest about my spray painting work, the work I would probably be most proud of was the graffiti side of stuff when I'd done like whole trains. So basically when I painted graffiti, it was pretty much predominantly just on trains. So that was every car, top to bottom, full train. So then actually when you said what am I most proud of, that actually sprung to mind, to be honest. But then there's lots of different reasons, you know, I'm proud of a lot of the community stuff that I now do. That feels like a different world. Like what I'm doing now, I get to work on a lot of community projects, which brightens up the area. We work with local shops, we work with loads of shop owners, local residents, and I mean, some of those can, you know, I can feel a real proudness doing that. I recently worked on a project in Bradford. I worked on a couple actually. I worked on one in Manningham and I worked on one at Homewood area, which are both areas that seem to be the best area and in need of some regeneration. So I did a couple of projects working in both those areas and seeing the impact that's had on locals and the local area. Again, yeah, there was that, that makes you feel proud as well for different reasons, like less of a personal reason. It's nice to see people enjoying the work you've done and then enjoying or using a space that was neglected or whatever. So yeah, that makes me proud as well. Me and a couple of friends just completed the Eddie Gray one at Elland Road. So that was nice to do, meeting him, doing it in such an iconic spot of such an iconic person.
So my first ever mural was actually just in this building for Ice Creek Workshops, and it was just a test that I could actually do one. So it's just in the reception area. And that was just, actually no, it wasn't. That wasn't my first mural. I really randomly did my first mural straight out of uni at the Truman Brewery in London. And then they contacted me afterwards and wanted me to do a mural at the top of a stairwell in Truman Brewery, it was good. It was just like working on my own in this space, working on painted brick, which was so difficult. So yeah, I really threw myself in at the deep end. I started doing them in Leeds. So yeah, I did one at this studio building. And then, yeah, I think actually the boat, which was a very challenging mural, was like really early doors for me. It was, my first one outside, my first one using spray paint. So again, didn't make life easy for myself. After that, it just kind of blew up a bit. I did a load down London with this company for like hotels and short stay apartments, and just for like businesses in Barnsley as well. So yeah, it's interesting. I never really know how I get the gigs, but they turn up.
The one that I really enjoyed the most was the Canal and River Trust one. The whole process was great. The reason why I enjoyed it so much was because it was part of the funding the funding pot was from, it's called Interreg funding. And the whole idea for what the piece of work that I did was this funding going towards helping people come onto the canals, and it's about like mental health and well-being, essentially. I enjoyed slowing down the process of painting, and I really enjoyed like taking the time to every single person that was interested going past. Like I could easily just get stuck in and do it and blast it out, but I wanted to take my time and talk to every passerby and just see like, how you doing? Like, what do you think to this? And why are you on the canal, sort of thing, like trying to understand like what they're doing. And you got some really, really interesting conversations out of it. Because like one of my favorite things is conversation. I keep saying like, if I could just like have conversations for a living, I'd love it. Like that would be brilliant. But it just so happens that the art that I create causes conversations, and this one caused like the biggest conversation out of any piece that I've ever done, both good and bad. Yeah, no, it was brilliant to talk to all of these people and like get their opinion, and like, someone would go past on a boat like, doing well, mate, have a good yeah, that was my favourite for that exact reason.
I think I'm very partial to the new pavilion, which was in Morley. Actually, that was the sample that came from that. But it was because I think that one is really partial to me because it was the first time I got given something ridiculously huge. And it was like something that I was still a student when I applied, and then they were like, yeah, congratulations, you've got it. Like, do you want to do 52 installations on this giant 3-story building? And I was just like, oh my God, yeah, obviously, but oh, okay, cool. So I got it, and then I had this kind of realization of like, oh my God, how do I do this? I've never done anything this massive. And that project was just so amazing because it was when I started tying history into my work, and I'd figured out that this was what I was fascinated in. And I started doing, it was still during COVID, so you couldn't really like do community engagement in the way that I do now, but I did like a open call on it was like a Facebook page called like, I can't remember what it was something like Good Times and Old Memories in Morley or something really cute. And I just said like, does anyone have any stories about this building? And I got so many responses. People loved this building, and it clearly was like the heart of the community for like such an extended period of time. And now, unfortunately, it's like stood abandoned. But what I'd learned was that basically from like the early 1900s, it was a theatre where the first act that was there was someone called Vulcana, who actually, that painting's based on her, and she was like this amazing strong woman who her act was that she could lift like an entire man above her head with just like one arm, and she was this amazing like feminist icon who like fought against corsets. And so it went from a theatre to a cinema, and I collected all these amazing stories about like someone had met their wife at the cinema and then they like got together and obviously became married. So woven into the artwork I have like a date that happens and there's like a cheeky kiss at the end. And then another one was that the man who was in charge of the archives, he'd always talked about how he went to the movies and he saw like cowboy movies with his sister, and then they'd get fish and chips on the way home. So I've like woven, I actually have like a photograph of him and his sister that I like drew in their like little outfits that they had. And they're like going to the movies and the artwork, and then they're getting fish and chips on the way home. So there's all like references to the oral histories that people gave me. And that was just like such a beautiful project, because the first time I used oral histories, it was the first time that I was starting to like use archival material and piece it together into like how I create my illustrations. And like I was saying before, connecting that link and relationship between the location and artwork and public art, and how we can use illustration as a tool to encourage public engagement with local heritage. And that project was just like, it's always a special place in my heart, because it was the first time that so many things were piecing together of like what I love to do. And it's still there as well, which is really nice. Because basically like the building's abandoned and it was going to be turned into like a block of flats, but the community like rose up and really wanted it to be protected. So now I think it's like in some form of like transition where it might become like a community space run by the council. But in the meantime, instead of the ugly plywood that was just like boarded up in the windows, there's like 52 illustrations.
So the other question is, what is in the future? What do you sort of, I guess first of all, the immediate future, and then maybe future gazing a little bit?
Yeah, so more short term, I'm saving up to build my own studio, which will be not in my house but in my garden. So it'll be, you know, not a spare bedroom studio. I didn't want that. I was very adamant that I wanted a actual functioning purpose-built studio. I think that helps me get in the right mindset, and hopefully out of that I would then maybe be able to do it full time. I think that's every artist's dream, just to be able to paint all day and not have any other commitments.
So going forward, I'd like to just be painting my murals in my own style and people coming specifically to me and letting me do my own thing. My real love these days is my studio practice, so it's the portraiture and the oil painting, which I've fallen in love with. And I've kind of got quite a different style in that. So I think going forward, I'd like to combine the two a lot more and hopefully get to be doing some of my kind of figurative stuff, like what's like my fine art. I'd like to be doing that large scale as murals in the same style and kind of bring the two together.
I just built my studio in my garden, my new studio, which I haven't moved into yet, which again has been like a big like tick for me in terms of like I designed the whole thing and built it from the ground up. I'm always very envious of like painters or artists that like seem to just be like in their studio constantly making. And then I'm always like, but you can do that. Like, why aren't you doing it? And to be honest, it's been financial ties that have stopped me. But it does feel nice at the prospect of having some time where I can be maybe a bit more downtime in the studio, making like stuff for myself that could potentially lead into other things.
Like I've done a lot of like characters for people, for instance, and I would love to do, like I say, a marching crowd of characters that all do different things and are all part of like different categories for whatever. But then yeah, with the mural side of stuff, it's like, how big can I go? Like where can I go with it? I'd love to do like a massive side of a building, for instance, for a mural, but also like for the illustration side and things like that, I would love, big like projects where I'm like designing something for a massive festival or something, but like every little, like intricate little characters and things like that.
So what would the dream be?
The dream? Definitely, I think the dream is just to keep going. Like, I'm working on so many projects that I absolutely love, and I've had the opportunity to work on so many in the past that I really found fascinating and I was really passionate about. And like, the dream would just be able to basically essentially just keep doing that and be financially stable in doing that. So like, if I could somehow have a bit more stability, that would be amazing. But yeah, I think if I can just keep going and working on these amazing projects that are about heritage and communities, and I'd love to work with museums more because it's always such an interesting context to like start inspiration and research. But yeah, maybe like, it's always fun to do really large scale stuff. So like, obviously this one in Halifax it's probably like the biggest thing I've done so far. But yeah, maybe just keep going is the dream.
The dream is to not compromise on the style of my work or the message, but to just be able to do it like every day. And to collaborate more with other artists and curators, because it's something I don't have the time for at the minute. So I'd really love to have the time to collaborate more in the future.
I already feel like I'm living my dream life, if I'm honest. Like, I think if I can just stay in this, like, having this nice flow of projects and like feeling good about my work and just making more and continuing to develop as an artist, really, like, and allowing myself that time and development.
I just don't want to ever feel like I'm done with it. I don't feel like I'll ever stop it because I love it so much, and the dream is to allow myself to translate these ideas through many different things, objects, like everything.
I mean, genuinely, my dream would be just to be able to be comfortable enough to make art every day for my own mental health. That would be my dream. If I can support my family and my lifestyle by doing something I love, that's the dream for me, and I'm fortunately enough to be doing it. More specifically, I want to have my work in the National Portrait Gallery. So yeah, that would be my dream, for sure.
The big one is like, what would be the dream job or the dream piece of work to create?
I suppose to have a big mural in the heart of Leeds, really. That would be my dream, and that dream has come true.
Back about, drop the mic.
But I think, we've got a natural creativity in us. That's what makes us human, I think.
So many beautiful details of humanity that if you like stop and watch people and like have a bit of like people watching with a cup of tea, you will see so many like wonderful glimmers of like humanity.
I do have to like remind myself, even when I'm having like those days of doubt, that I'm like doing a job that I literally never dreamt in a million years that I'd be doing.
I think that's the other thing which is really beautiful about it, is the amount of pictures that we get tagged in and the amount of different situations and scenarios and people, and it gives me goosebumps. It just is incredible that it does, resonate for so many different reasons in different times and in different situations. And that's why it's the perfect landmark.
What do you think it is that makes you get up on a morning?
And do my job?
Yeah.
It's definitely like just a pure love for it. I know that sounds so cheesy, but it's just something where like I'm always excited to do it. Like the projects that I'm working on, luckily, are things that I'm really passionate about. So it is probably one of the only things that really does, like if I had to get up early, the only things I would get up early for are probably like a flight and my work. and everything else I've kind of like,
Yeah, sometimes you can kind of satisfy that creative need just with the most random stuff. If I come here and I actually don't have time to paint, but just like reorganise my paints or have a little tidy or just look through old work, like that will satisfy the craving kind of thing.
Plus just like a pure joy and love for it. Like I love it. I really love what I do. So just getting up, I'm like, I get to draw shit.
We've all got a story to tell, you know, and we've all got our own voice and we've all got our unique perspective on things. And, you know, that's, if you can bring that out in your work and you can make that, you know, have that honesty to make the work that you really connect with, and, you know, you're not just doing it because it's the latest thing that you've seen that looks cool. You know, it's like you're really making your own statement about things. That's when it's valid, and I think that's when it becomes important, or that's when it connects with people.
I'm not sure really, but yeah, we'll just see what happens. Trust the process.
Now that's the cut. That's the cut. I like that. I see